Okay, welcome on everyone. Today is Tuesday, and therefore we're going to do a Rashi from the third Aliyah. I'd actually like to show you a Rashi just on the bridge between the second and third Aliyah um, using a new computer. So just give me 1 second here. Um, hmm. 1 second. That's strange. Okay, it's not letting me share my screen at this moment, but you'll have to trust me on this one. I'll read you the pasuk, and you can trust me on that. Um, Sorry about that. Okay, so in the end of the second aliyah, just one thing I wanted to point out. The Paro is praising Yosef for his interpretation of dreams. Vayomer Paro lavadav, hanimtza kazeh ish asher ruach Elokim bo. He makes this kind of statement to everybody. Is there anybody like this? Can we even find such a person asher ruach Elohim bo, as the spirit of God within him? I wanted to mention this pasuk, even though Rashi doesn't mention anything on this pasuk, but it continues a Rashi in a theme that we mentioned already a couple of times, and that is that Shem Shemayim Shagur Befiv, that we mentioned last week in the Parsha, that how did the people in Potiphar's house, for example, understand that God was with Yosef? So Rashi pointed out the reason why is not because they had some magical power of divination, but because Shem Shemayim Shagur B'fiv, he was saying God's name all the time, and therefore because God's name was on his lips, they became used to it and they became influenced by it. And we talked a little bit about the story in the Gemara about using God's name in documents, if you remember, in the time of the Chashmonayim and the celebration of that holiday. And that theme continues in other ways. Already in jail, when Yosef is interpreting the dreams, the butler and the baker, again, they recognize that God is with him. And now Paro recognizes it as well, Isha Sheruach Elohim Bo. And I would imagine that it's not just because he was able to interpret the dreams, but just as Rashi said on that very original mention of it in Beis Potiphar, that because he recognized that this was a godly man, a man who was saying God's name a lot. And therefore, this is a theme that continues throughout Yosef's life. I didn't want to let that go without mentioning it, to this one instance of it over here. On to our aliyah, the third aliyah. I want to mention two quick Rashis. One, as this aliyah is about Yosef's appointment as the viceroy of Egypt. And one of the things that Paro does in order to elevate him to his status of gedula, of greatness, is Vayasar Paro es tabato me'al yado, vayiten osa arot al yad Yosef. Paro takes the signet ring off of his hand and he puts it on to Yosef. He also gives him different clothes and he parades him b'merkevas hamishna, on the chariot of the king, or the second in command to the king. So all of this is very reminiscent, of course, of the story of Megillas Esther, which reverberates later on. There's a lot of connections between Esther and Yosef in general, but certainly in terms of their rise to greatness, and then Mordechai's eventual rise to greatness, all the trappings of kingship are contained in both stories. And that's not surprising. There may be no connection between the stories other than the fact that kingship was viewed in a certain way or portrayed in a certain way in the time of Tanakh. But there are even linguistic connections over here between when Mordechai gets appointed as kind of the second in command to Achashverosh versus over here where Yosef is appointed second in command to Paro. But one of the things that's done is the signet ring is taken off. And Rashi explains over here, Nesinas tabas hamelech hi os lamisha nesuna liosheni lo begadula, that taking off the signet ring is a sign that the person receiving the ring will be second in command to the king. So that's common between the two stories, and that's what's happening here with Yosef. And now our Rashi for today, the punchline of our discussion today, which again, I'm sorry you can't see on your screen. But when he finally appoints him as the Mishnah Lamelech, the pasuk says, this is pasuk Mem Dalet, Perak Mem Aleph, pasuk Mem Dalet, if you're looking in your own Tanakh. Vayomer Paro el Yosef. Paro says to Yosef in this proclamation of what his status would be, Ani Paro, I am Paro. Uviladecha lo yarim ish et yado vet raglo b'chol eretz Mitzrayim. And aside from you, no one will raise their hand or their foot in all of Egypt. So the second half of the pasuk I understand. Viladecha lo yarim ish et yado vet raglo b'chol eretz Mitzrayim means no one's going to have power like you in Egypt. There will be none like you. Fine. But what's the intro words? Ani Paro, comma, Biladecha lo yarimish. You don't need ani Paro. You know he's Paro. Paro is speaking to Yosef. He's appointing him as second in command. They have this whole relationship. They're going to work together. He trusts him. He appoints him. He could have just said, Vayomer Paro Yosef, ubiladecha lo yarimish et yado. Paro could have just said to him, aside from you, no one will raise their hand in the entire land. You'll be as powerful as anybody else. So what's that introductory phrase? Ani Paro, that announcement. I am Paro, which seems to be superfluous. Rashi gives two opinions over here, and I think it reflects an interesting tension in this relationship between Paro and Yosef. Ani Paro, he says, sheyesh biadi yecholet ligzor gzeros al malchusi, v'ani gozer shelo yarim ish es yado biladecha shelo birshuscha. One possibility is he reminds him, Ani Paro, I have therefore the power to say that you're going to be the most powerful person in Egypt, right? So I'm about to appoint you. I'm about to tell you there's no one going to be more powerful than you aside from me. There's no one more powerful than you. And lest you question how it is that I should make such a proclamation, or lest you think that it's false or insincere or impossible in some way, I'm going to remind you first, Ani Paro. I am Paro. I have the power to make any law in Egypt I want, and the law that I'm about to make is that there will be no one more powerful than you. Okay, that's one possibility. Davar Acher, Rashi gives a second possibility. Ani Paro. Ani eye melech, biladecha, etc. So dugmara kisa egdal mimeka. The second possibility is that as he's appointing him to be the second in command, the most powerful person in Egypt, first he reminds him, Ani Paro, lest you think that you're going to be the most powerful, lest you think that somehow you're going to overtake me or something like that, I'm going to remind you as you rise to greatness, Ani Paro, don't ever forget, I am Paro, I'm the most powerful, and now I'm going to tell you, Biladecha lo yarimish, and aside from you, there's going to be no one else more powerful than you. So Rashi is pointing out a tension here. The Ani Paro could either be a reminder to Yosef of just how powerful he's going to be, right? That's the first version of Rashi. Rashi says the Ani Paro is a reminder to Yosef, hey, Yosef, I Paro am Paro. I'm the king. I have the power to do what I want, and what I'm doing now is giving you power. Right? So the Ani Paro is a preface to how much power Yosef is going to have. The second version is the exact opposite. The Ani Paro is a proclamation to Yosef that even though you're going to be powerful, don't ever forget, Ani Paro, I am Paro, I am the most powerful. It's meant to mitigate against the power of Yosef that he's about to have, to make sure he doesn't overtake Paro himself. And I think that's the tension with any appointment of a second in command. Any king that appoints a second in command, especially a very successful second in command like Yosef was, on the one hand, wants to give him power, wants to raise him. On the second hand, is afraid of him overshadowing him or overtaking him or threatening him or causing a mutiny or whatever a king might be afraid of. And so the two versions of Rashi interpreting these very terse statements, Ani Paro, which seems ambiguous and unnecessary in the pasuk, I think could be either one or the other, or as I'm suggesting now, might be a little bit of both. Ani Paro, I'm giving you a lot of power, but don't forget I'm Paro. So both of them, perhaps true in this pasuk, reflective of the tension of the relationship in general. Thank you so much. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.